Hey guys, welcome back to the channel for another Project Zomboid video. Recently I covered a video with some tips for getting started when you're new to the game. So in this video I wanted to look at that stage where you're a week or so into your playthrough and you're looking to prepare for long-term survival. Managing your priorities here can be tough. You might not even know where to put your efforts, so that's what we'll be covering in this video. If you do find it useful, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really does help me as a creator. And I also stream Project Zomboid almost every day at the moment over on twitch.tv/Mr. Atomic Doug. So if you're interested in that, feel free to swing by. So you've survived the first week or so of your playthrough, like we just mentioned. You'll probably have a base of operations by this point, and you're now looking to take some steps to prepare for the future. You might already be aware that the power and water will turn off at some stage, but you might not be aware of how to prepare for it, so let's start there. And then we can get into the more complicated stuff. When it comes to prepping for the taps running dry, there are a couple of solutions to your problem. The first option is to fill any container you can with water before the taps turn off. Buckets, cooking pots, whatever you can find. Fill them up, leave them in storage at your base, and at the very least you're going to have a supply to keep you going if worse comes to worst. However, this is a pretty short-term solution to a long-term problem. You'll need to take a much more varied approach in general. The ideal long-term solution to the drought is to find a base location with a well. These wells will have an infinite supply of drinking water, but are generally located in very rural locations, so they won't be viable for everyone. The next option you've got is a lot more suitable if you're located in an urban area. If you go searching through some of the office buildings, you'll be able to find some water dispensers. These only weigh 5 kilograms, but come with 250 units of clean drinking water, which is a huge amount for a relatively easy item to get back to your base. And you can collect quite a few of these, and they'll keep you going for quite some time. I do this regularly when I'm building my bases. Your next option ties in quite nicely with the water dispensers. If you can get carpentry to level 4 with the help of watching Woodcraft every day for the first 9 days before the TV station shuts off, you can build rain collectors with the help of 4 garbage bags, 4 planks, a hammer, and some nails. And just a note here, Woodcraft is on at 12 PM on the show Life and Living, so make sure you're tuned into that and you can watch it every day for the first 9 days of survival. These will collect some rain en masse and hold 80 units of water each, which will need to be purified if you intend to use them as drinking water. Boil them in a kettle or a cooking pot and then transfer the water to a water dispenser. These solutions are your best bet for the long term. Next up, we've got the electrical grid. Once this shuts off, you'll need to be ready to power your base with the help of fuel instead. You can find generators like these ones in any industrial spawn area, but you'll have the most luck finding them in small sheds or garages in residential areas. One thing to note here, if you do find a generator, make sure you place it outside of your base. Placing it inside will result in fumes building and you'll get sick from fume inhalation. You'll also most likely need a vehicle, as these generators weigh 20 kilograms and can be a pain to haul back to your base without one. Once they're hooked up, you just need to make sure that they've got enough fuel to keep them powered. I'd always advise trying to stock up on gas from a gas station before the power actually goes out, and once the power does go out, you'll need to actually bring another generator with you to the gas station in order to power the pumps. So if you can, it's always beneficial if you can set up an extra generator at a nearby gas station preemptively to help with this. If at any point you need to repair your generator, you just need some scrap metal, and for the most part you can gather this through basic dismantling using metalworking. Now, after we've solved the main issues of water and power, we've got to start looking at food. Thankfully, this one isn't too hard to solve in comparison to the first things we've looked at in this video. Collecting canned food is obviously a viable and simple solution, but it's not going to give you the best outcome when it comes to food and the stats that you could get from it. Canned food generally gets used up pretty quickly, and it isn't as nutritious as fresh food in most cases. So my best recommendation here when it comes to food is to watch Exposure Survival on the TV. Again, Life and Living, every day at 6 PM. Quite often this show will teach you things like farming, trapping, fishing, or foraging. All of these options are good for long-term fresh food, especially farming and trapping. Now, fishing is a good option, but it is situational, as you'll need to be close to a body of water, and not everybody will be. For farming, however, you'll just require some seeds, a trowel, and water containers. I'd recommend planting cabbages if you have them, as they make for great bait for traps and can be used in a lot of cooking cooking recipes many times over before you actually use one of them up. Their growing times are also a lot shorter than many other crop choices, which makes them great for getting started. But if you don't have these, just plant what you've got and try to do so as early as possible. Ideally, you'll want to find a watering can, as it holds a bit more water than any other water container available, and I tend to use water collected by a rain collector when watering crops, just so that I don't need to purify the water, and it just saves a bit of time by doing so. So if you can, make sure you place your water collector close to the crops. You can monitor the status of your crops at any time by right-clicking and selecting info. If you can, also look at collecting some fertilizer to increase the yield of your crops, and a gardening spray can, which will allow you to craft cures to various crop diseases like flies. These are optional, but can be very handy. Once you've got some crops growing, we're going to need to increase your freezer space. Now, freezers will pretty much halt the progress of food rotting, so you can store food for long periods without a care in the world. Your only problem is that most commonly found freezers don't hold very much. I'd recommend heading to a gas station and look out for a freezer unit with ice written on the side. These hold 60 kilograms in total and will be an absolute godsend when it comes to freezing your food for the long term. Hopefully, you'll live long enough to see your crops grow to fruition, and if you do, this is when we put these to use to catch you some more food that's a bit more lively. There are 3 types of trap we can build to catch creatures in the wild: the snare box, the trap box, or the trap crate. The others won't catch rabbits, or will be for higher level trapping than you're likely going to have at this stage. All 3 of these types of trap can catch rabbits or squirrels. Rabbits will fetch more meat, which is why we're baiting with cabbage, which only rabbits enjoy. I'll leave a link in the description for further trapping methods and baits for different creatures if you're interested in branching out a little bit. Hunter magazines will teach you the recipes required to build these traps, so you'll want to keep an eye out for these if you don't have the recipes already. Once you can craft one, check your crafting menu to see the supplies you'll need, and take some cabbage and your traps to a location a little ways from your base. Place it too close and you won't catch anything. It needs to be 75 tiles away from your current location to ensure that something will be caught. Rabbits will generally be caught between 7 PM and 5 AM, so you can check these traps in the morning for the best results. Place a trap and then add your cabbage as bait. If you come back to a catch, you can butcher them for meat with most knives or a meat cleaver. Throw them in the freezer and you'll be bringing in plenty of food for the winter. Lastly, if you happen to pick park ranger as your occupation, you'll already have the recipes for all the traps that you can place. And last of the 3 options for securing food, we have fishing. You can find most of the supplies you'll need in garages, hardware stores, or industrial locations for this one. You'll need to get started with a fishing rod, either some tackle, worms, or bait fish. Bait fish can be collected by placing a fishing net into a body of water, then checking it regularly, and worms can be dug up or foraged as well if you want to use that as a bait option. Tackle can be found where you'll find fishing rods. Head to a nearby source of water with the necessary supplies and then just cast in. From there, you'll just have to wait. Watch your back though. Fast forwarding during this process can be a risky move as if you're out in the wild, because there are always some zombies lurking nearby, so just be aware of that one. So earlier we touched on TV shows briefly, but one of the most important aspects of Project Zomboid can be skills and leveling them. Not leveling key skills like carpentry, electrical, metalworking, and the various survival skills can be devastating later on. So what I tend to do is start reading books early whilst doing other tasks. Whether I'm cooking food, actually watching TV, or just killing a couple of hours before my character gets some rest for the night, reading a book to multiply the rate at which you gain experience in particular skills can be incredibly helpful later, so try to find time for it early on. For that, we're going to need to actually acquire the books you need. Several built-up areas have bookstores or libraries, and often schools will also possess books as well. Even when you're looting residential housing, there's likely going to be a bookcase lying around somewhere in the house, so make sure you check them and make a habit of picking up all the books labeled beginner or intermediate. Those are the ones that you're going to need. By this stage, you'll probably have most of the basic recipes you'll need and can make a note of where the higher tier books are for later. Couple these books and XP multipliers with watching TV during the first 9 days and you'll be well on your way to becoming an expert survivor. And once again, you can watch the TV at 6 AM, 12 PM, or 6 PM to pick up some skills on the Life and Living channel. Finally, before we wrap up this video, I wanted to touch on some tools you'll need to collect for long-term progression in Project Zomboid. I'll try to cover just about everything you could need for practical tasks or or skills in the game. So firstly, we'll look at construction supplies. The basics here are a hammer, a saw, nails, and an axe. This will allow you to chop down trees, destroy doors, and build most basic structures like walls or doors. But the ones you want to focus early on are the hammer, the nails, and an axe. This will allow you to barricade windows and doors to get you started with base defenses. I'd also recommend keeping an eye out for a sledgehammer. These tend to be quite rare, but will allow you to destroy walls, doorways, that sort of thing. A lot of people like to use these to destroy stairs, cutting off any chance of a zombie making it to the second floor of a building. Then run a sheet rope out of a window to make the base accessible to you only. There are other practical uses, however, like breaking down the wall to an otherwise inaccessible gun store, for example. Generally, these items can be found in any construction spawn in the game. Next up is the screwdriver, which will allow you to hotwire cars, lockpick doors with the help of a bobby pin, or dismantle electronic items for some electrical supplies, and a few points in the electrical skill. Definitely want to try and snag for later if you happen to find one. Now, this one sounds fairly basic, but acquiring a few different cooking containers can be a big help later. Roasting pans, cooking pots, baking pans, that sort of thing. This will allow you to make up a variety of meals when you get around to cooking, rather than just eating one item to reduce hunger, whilst also making your character less bored and increasing happiness. I also like to collect a few bowls for splitting down large amounts of food into meals, but that isn't essential necessarily. A propane torch and welding mask will be useful for later for anything metalworking related, whether it's dismantling metal items or crafting new ones. If you can, try to make sure that the propane torch is full when you find it to save you any trouble later. On the same note, when it comes to propane, acquiring a barbecue that uses propane tanks can be a huge help and will save a lot of fuel for your generator later on. I use these to cook food once the power goes off in its entirety, just because it slows the rate at which you use fuel in your generators. Sticking with tools, keep your eyes open for a trowel and a watering can for farming like we mentioned earlier. The sooner you get your crops planted, the better. Shovels can also be a big help when it comes to burying bodies to keep away any risks of infection. On that same token, finding some cleaning liquid and a mop will allow you to clean your walls of blood and keep your base risk-free. You'll also want to keep cleaning liquid and soap for washing your character and your clothes, which will stop you getting infections if you get a cut. As we mentioned earlier as well, when it comes to acquiring food, you'll want to make sure you have a knife or meat cleaver for butchering animals that you catch, as well as a fishing rod and preferably some tackle for fishing. Lastly, there's a whole range of tools you might need if you decide to get into mechanical work with vehicles. Wrenches, jacks, that sort of thing. Personally, this isn't something that I invest in too heavily, as it's perfectly possible to just source additional vehicles, but just bear in mind that there's quite a few different tools associated with vehicle maintenance if you decide to go down that route, and it can always pay off to collect them early on. That's it from me in this one, guys, but I hope this video helps you prepare for the long game in Project Zomboid and gives you a few goals to aim for moving forward. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video useful, once again, do consider subscribing to the channel for more videos and liking this video. Thanks folks, see you all in the next one.